Have you heard of Russian piping tips? These buttercream flowers might look like they're hard to make, but with Russian piping tips, you can pipe whole flowers all in one go. Welcome to Baking Butterly Love. In this video, I'll show you the different types of Russian piping tips, how to use them with more than one color, and how to pipe them onto your cakes. So these are Russian piping tips. They're these huge tubes with multiple holes cut into them so that when you pipe, they create a fully formed flower. Just to show you how big they are, here's a Russian piping tip next to a Wilton 1M, which is a fairly large piping tip. So you can see the openings are much wider than a regular piping tip. You'll want to make sure your piping bag is big enough for these tips. I'd recommend at least a 12-inch piping bag. To fit these tips into your piping bag, cut off the end of the bag so that it comes just below the end of your piping tip. If you cut off too much, the piping tip might be pushed out as you squeeze. Because these piping tips are too big for a standard coupler, you might want to use an inner and outer bag in order to be able to switch colors. Here I filled a smaller bag with pink frosting that can fit inside the larger bag. When you're ready for a different color, simply switch out the smaller bag. You could also change the tip in the larger bag to make different flowers with the same colors. It's really important to have the right consistency frosting for Russian piping tips. Here I'm using Italian Meringue Buttercream, but you could also use American Buttercream or Swiss Meringue Buttercream. Just make sure your frosting is stiff enough to hold itself up. If your buttercream is not stiff enough, let it chill in the fridge for a few minutes until it's firmed up. Afterwards, beat the buttercream again to make sure it's smooth. If you want to make two-toned flowers, you'll have to layer the colors inside your piping bag. Prop your bag up in a glass, and then use a small spatula to paint one color down the sides of the bag, leaving the center clear. This color will be the petals on the outside of your flower. Next, carefully fill the center of the bag with a different color. Push the second color down so that the bag is filled, but try not to let the colors mix. Use this technique to create two-tone flowers, which will have a lot more visual interest than a single color. It's also a really good idea to practice piping these flowers before you pipe them on your actual cake. There's a certain knack to getting them to pipe out cleanly, so you'll just have to practice until you get it. Spread some frosting on a cake board or plate to create a sticky surface to practice on. Hold the piping tip so that it's completely vertical. Don't touch the tip to your surface, but do make sure the frosting attaches when you begin to pipe. Squeeze and slowly pull upward until the flower is the right height. Stop squeezing and pull the bag straight up away from the flower. I found the right height to be about half as tall as the piping tip. If you pipe them too short or too tall, they won't look quite right. Also be sure to keep the end of the piping tip clean. If it gets clogged up, just scrape away the excess frosting. Piping leaves is a great way to accent your Russian piping tip flowers. You could use a leaf tip to pipe directly on your cake, but here I'm going to use a flower nail and pipe some frilly leaves that will make my flowers really pop. To pipe these leaves, use a small petal tip like this number 102 tip. Pipe a small dot of buttercream onto your flower nail to attach a parchment square. Then, wiggle the tip as you pipe up and down in the shape of a long leaf. You could make these as long or as short as you like. Place them on a tray and refrigerate them until firm. When you're done piping your flowers, you can go back and place the leaves onto your cake by hand. After you've practiced flowers and piped your leaves, you're ready to decorate your cake. So here I'm piping onto a cake that has already been frosted and chilled. And you'll see I made a little mistake here. Because the cake was chilled, the flowers weren't really sticking. But it's not a big deal. I was able to scrape them off and start again. So if you're piping onto a chilled cake, just spread a little frosting where you want the flowers to be so that you have a sticky surface to work on. Once you have all the flowers you want, use a little more frosting to attach your leaves. If they are well chilled, you should be able to use your hands, peel them off the parchment, and place them exactly where you want. So that's the final cake. Do you have any more questions about Russian piping tips? Leave a comment below and let me know. If you enjoyed this video, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. I post new cake decorating videos and tutorials every week. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at BakingButterlyLove and tag me if you use any of the tips from this video. I'd love to see what you make. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next week.